All right. Okay, I was a little bit late getting on, but hopefully it'll be worth the wait for you. I'm hoping that'll be the case. I think it will be the case. There's always that stress of, who's gonna be jumping on this evening. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be going through what it means to build an audience when it comes to ad platforms and how that translates to whatever you are positioning. I am a recruiter. If you don't know about me already, that's what I do for a living. So one of the things I'm going to kind of really be doing in terms of focusing the material, I'm going to be focusing more on the recruitment side. However, if you're in some other kind of business, I think this will still be very appropriate for you because you're still at least learn some of the same terminology that goes into building an audience, right? I'm going to go into some of the nuances behind it as well. I'm going to be using the analogy of a food court to help us understand building an audience. And so hopefully this will help you. And I want to see your feedback as we go through this discussion. So let me know if you're chiming in from here in the United States, overseas, wherever you are. Let me know where you're signing in from. And I'd love to answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to take some of the mystery out of some of the things that some of the things that are involved with the ad platforms. If you're using LinkedIn, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, you may not even be aware that there's kind of a hidden platform. It's the ad platform that you just don't really see or pay attention to. It's what all the marketers are basically using to relay their message. So if you're a business owner, this is going to be very helpful for you. If you're a recruiter, it's going to be extremely helpful for you. If you are actually an HR leader, a recruitment leader, it's really going to help you as well. Because I do speak with a lot of recruitment leaders, and there's still like a lot of mystery around it. They don't quite 100% understand it. So I want to make it real easy just by sharing it and using an analogy of a food court, and hopefully this will help. So, and even if someone's not even watching this at the moment, it doesn't matter to me. It's good practice because it's going to give me an opportunity to practice presenting this to other folks. So let me know what you think. If you're watching this live or if you're watching the replay, let me know what you think about what you see, and I'd love to get your feedback. Let me know if you have any other additional questions. Okay, so let's get right into the material. What does a food court have to do with advertising? Well, I guess if you have a restaurant, I guess it would be very appropriate. But I don't have a restaurant. But I wanted to think about what's an easy way I can explain some of these terms when it comes to advertising. So we got LinkedIn user. Hey, good to see you. It just says LinkedIn user. Let us know who you are. It says, hello, Rollis. Thank you for your time to share your knowledge and expertise. NorCal Central Valley. Love it. Let me know who you are. So appreciate you being here. One of the things that you probably have heard of before, you've heard the term impressions or views. Now I want to explain basically what that means. I want to use the example of a food court. So imagine you're at a food court and you're walking through this food court and you're trying to figure out what to eat, okay? As you're walking around this food court, you're going to see different signs for different types of food. And you're going to be able to make decisions. Now, as you walk along, let's say you notice there's a Chick-fil-A. Let's say you notice there's a Wendy's. Let's say you notice there's a Chinese restaurant there. Let's say you notice there's a Cajun restaurant there. You're noticing all these different restaurants. Those are called impressions because as you see the signs for those restaurants, that's an impression. In other words, you were able to see, oh, that's Chick-fil-A. Oh, that's Wendy's. Oh, that's McDonald's. So you're able to see the places. That's called impressions or views on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, it's called views. If you're using your organic, not organic, but just your normal postings that you make. Oh, hi, Daya. Okay, it's Daya. Excellent. So good to have you here. So if you're looking at these the stats when you're looking at your LinkedIn profile, it'll say views, and what that basically means is, do they have an opportunity to see it in their feed when they're scrolling? So if you're advertising on an ad platform, most ad platforms will use the term impressions. Sometimes they'll use views. They basically mean the same thing. Now, a view is not the same as a video view. That's totally different. I'm going to go into that in just a moment. But just imagine yourself walking through the food court. You're walking around. You're seeing the different signs. That's impressions or views. So when you're building an audience, you want to make sure that that audience is comprised of people that you want to view your content. You don't want to pay to have people view your content that has no interest in this. let's say, using this as an example, let's say I know that there's a set of people online who really, really like Chinese food. We know they like, because they've done all kind of search on the internet. They're part of Chinese food groups and foodies. We know they love Chinese food. If I already know that about them, I want to spend most of my ad dollars advertising to that audience who likes Chinese food if I have a Chinese restaurant, right? I'm not going to spend a lot of time with people who show to like other types of food, for example. Just using it as an example. It'd be like, let's say you sold dog food. You're not going to want to sell or pay for impressions to people who don't have dogs, right? So you want to build an audience that fits the impressions. Now, fortunately, on platforms like LinkedIn, you can actually target by job titles using a recruiter's point of view. So if you're a recruiter, you can actually drill down by their actual job title. So for instance, if I have a job order and it's for a chief nursing officer, I can go into LinkedIn and pull up all the chief nursing officers. I can drill down by size of hospital. I can drill down by location. I can drill down by seniority. There's tons of things I can do. And when I do that, I'm essentially building an audience. You can also do that, something similar with Google, but not the same. It's a little similar, but it's also not similar, okay? Because you can't really create an audience by job titles per se. It's a little more complicated on Google, but the concept is the same. You're trying to limit your impressions or views to those who'd be most interested in perhaps purchasing your product, or in my case, applying for my job. Does that make sense? Okay, so now that we've explained that, let's go to the next thing. The next thing is with impressions or views. As you're walking along, you notice there's a sign. And when you see that sign, let's say in this case, I just called it great coffee. I just made that up, okay? But let's say you see this sign that says great coffee. That's made an impression on your mind. You see this, you see the ad. Now you may just keep on walking. You may not even slow down, okay? You may just keep on walking. But that was an impression. And guess what? If you're on an ad platform, depending on how your campaign is set up, they can charge you per impression. Well, technically, they don't really charge you per impression. They charge you per 1,000 impressions. But basically, you get the point. They're going to charge you based on the amount of people who see your ads. That's a reason why you want to limit it to certain audiences, because you don't want to pay for folks who have no interest whatsoever in buying your service. Like, for instance, I don't have children, so I'm not going to be interested in buying diapers, right? So you wouldn't want to spend money showing me ads to buy diapers if I don't have children. Okay. All right. So James has a question. Hey, James, good to see you. Says I'm a huge fan of local business. So how does one attract an audience for many local businesses that are not on LinkedIn? Okay. You got to help me out with this. So first of all, folks, this is a great question. LinkedIn in the United States only has about 60 to 75 million active users. There's 325 million people who live in the United States. That means that LinkedIn has a relatively small percentage of all the people in the United States on their platform. If you want to catch more people who aren't on LinkedIn, probably the number one source there's two places you're going to want to go, depending on what kind of business it is. YouTube, and this goes for recruiting too. YouTube and the Google network, and then also secondarily to that, Facebook. Those are going to be your two top. Now, depending on what kind of demographic, older versus younger, depending on the type of product or service, will determine what platform you're going to want to use. TikTok is also a big one. So it really depends, James, on what type of local business you're talking about, because every platform has its own personality. But in this particular presentation, what I'd like to do is just go through the basics that can really be used on any ad platform in any type of audience. So number one, if you want to go for a wider audience, LinkedIn is not your place. What LinkedIn is great about is LinkedIn is great for targeting, especially for particular positions, sizes of companies. When you have to get really particular, LinkedIn is probably second to none on that. But in terms of getting to the masses of people, you're going to want to go through a Google or a YouTube or perhaps Facebook, and now that TikTok has an ad platform, probably even TikTok. And if it's a younger platform, it's very picturesque type stuff you're selling, then probably Instagram. But Instagram is owned by Facebook, so it's the same difference, right? Facebook and Instagram is all the same. Okay, so impressions or views. I want to make sure we understand this part. So you're walking through the food court, you see the sign, you may or may not slow down, but you see the sign there. Imagine just like scrolling your feed on your phone. That's called an impression. Now, what you want to do is you want to make sure your ads are being shown to audiences that may have interest in your ad. So, using the example of a recruiter, if I am trying to recruit a chief nursing officer, it's going to behoove me to make sure that most of my ads are seen by chief nursing officers, so they're much more likely to engage with that content. Now, what does engagement mean? Like, what do you mean engagement? That sounds like getting married. No. When I say engagement, it just means you're interacting with the content. And the reason why I'm using the term engagement is that's the term that the ad platforms use. There's two ways that they measure engagement. One of them is by video views. The other one is by clicks. So it's like if you're in the food court, you saw the great coffee sign I just showed you. Now you actually stop and say, you know what, let me check out the menu. I'm not sure if I'm ready to buy yet, but let me check out the menu. That's what we call engagement, because that great coffee sign you saw earlier, that was enough to make you stop and say, you know what, I want to see what kind of coffee they've got. That's called engagement. So that's usually measured by, in our case, when we do advertising for jobs, we use video views or clicks. Those are the two main ways that we measure engagement. Video views, depending on the platform, will determine a video view based on if they watched it for at least 3 seconds, like on a Facebook or LinkedIn. But when it's Google or YouTube, it's 30 seconds, which that's a great value. I absolutely love Google and YouTube for that they do that. It's amazing, because you're able to actually see how engaging your ads work, because you're not having to pay for these views where they only watch it literally for 2 or 3 seconds. So again, that's what we call a video view. Now, what if they watch a portion of the video, but they don't watch very much of it, and they click on it? They click on the link. That's also considered engagement if they take a buying action. A buying action would be either watching a significant amount of the video or clicking on it. Now, if they're clicking on it, you want to send them to a page that they're more likely going to take action on. So here's where I see recruiting organizations or HR companies waste money. And they don't do it on purpose, but they don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? First of all, the impressions. They're showing the ads to people who have no way of qualifying for that job. So it's basically a waste of money to send an ad to someone who cannot act on it, okay? Secondarily, they're getting these folks to perhaps click on it just because they're interested in what they see, but they still aren't qualified for the job. That also wastes money. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're putting in as many people as possible that would have at least a remote interest and qualifications for what we're presenting. That's where we determine that by engagement. If the engagement is low, then we know we need to adjust our targeting. We need to make sure that we improve our targeting. The next thing after that, after they click on it, let's say they watch the video, they click on the ad, in this case, my job posting, they go to my website, and it's as if they not only looked at the menu, but now they're actually getting in line to purchase and order. That's what we call conversions, or users, or visitors. So if they visit your website, we call that a user. So if you're using, let's say, Google Analytics or one of these programs to track all this, you're going to be able to track the amount of users that visit your page or visitors. Okay, those two terms are synonymous. And then the reason why we use the word conversion here, that's an ad platform term, which means that they not only clicked on your ad, but they actually did successfully land on your page and actually started interacting with your page. That's called a conversion. But if you're on Google Analytics or some type of analytic program, it's going to be called a user or a visitor. Those all three are basically the same. This is the ultimate goal, is you want to get as many people as possible that are converted to becoming a user of your page. Now that's where the magic happens, right? When I say magic, I don't literally mean magic. What I mean is that once they get on your page, what happens is you have the ability to not only show them your ads, or in this case, your job descriptions right now. Once they leave, you can actually keep showing them more things later by retargeting. Now, many people are aware of retargeting. I'll give you an example. Let's say you were looking for some shoes, and you look for these shoes and you found some Cole Haans. I'm just going to use, that's a guy brand, Cole Haans. Oh, let's say Nikes. Let's have a look at Nikes, whether they're men or women. I'm looking at Nike shoes. And I look up these Nike shoes, but I'm not ready to buy right now. In fact, I got a little distracted. I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to watch a television show, or whatever the case is. I didn't buy the shoes. Well, the next time I'm on Google, or maybe YouTube, or maybe Facebook, or maybe LinkedIn, I see another ad for shoes again. Wow, that wasn't by accident. That means that the marketer had put in a code that when you visited that site, it retargets you. And the next time you go back on to whoever put out that tracking code, the next time you go back on one of their sites, it will show you another ad. So that's where the retargeting comes into play. That's why at some point, if you can, you want to get them to go to your website and not just look at videos. You want them to take a buying action. So this is a great buying action. You've got your customers, they're in line, and this is what I would call applicants in the recruiting business, right? So these applicants are there waiting to apply. Now, here's where I see a lot of HR departments make this mistake. And again, we don't know what we don't know, right? That's why I'm here to help. You're making them wait too long to apply. I get things back from nurses. They say it may take them 30, 45 minutes to fill out one application. You have to have all this information. And one of the things too, a nurse leader told me just the other day is, why can't we just make it where at least the software pulls the information? If you need to have all this information, why don't you just pull it from my resume that's already, it's already laid out. So what we have done, we don't make them go through all that. We have them quickly apply within 3 minutes or less, just putting in simple information like their name, their email address, their phone number, and maybe they click what they're interested in or something like that. But it's just very simple, very quick and easy. James, let me address James. Before I move on, I'm going to address James's comment here. He says, for example, my best friend has a local business that is not on LinkedIn. She has news that sells all nurture products. Not sure I understand that. Maybe you could help me with that, James. Explain a little bit further what that means. I'm going to try and go off what I see here. First of all, I would say to your friend, I would encourage them to, at the very least, have a page on all of the major platforms. That's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and see if your best friend can have a TikTok too. I mean, have everything, because it doesn't cost you anything to have it. So step number one is go ahead and get your page out there. And I would suggest what's even more important than the page would actually be your best friend. Let's just call your best friend Susie. I'm just going to make up her name. So I would say to Susie, let's make sure you get a LinkedIn profile. It's got your picture on it. It's filled out. It shows that you own this business. And when it shows that you own the business, it's got the logo for your business in there, and it has a company page there. Make sure that's all there. Let's go on Facebook, Susie. Let's make sure your Facebook is set up. It shows that you own this business. And so it ties her to her business. Same thing with Twitter. With Twitter's a little bit different, but basically have a Twitter handle, and then same thing with TikTok. Have all those, Instagram as well. That's step number one. Before I would do anything with ad campaigns, make sure that you have a nicely filled out page, personal and company, on each of those platforms. That is step one. That's what I would tell your best friend to do if I was in front of your best friend. And I'm just calling her Susie. I don't know what her name is, James, but I would say, Susie, please, let's get your profile on there. That's the best way you can help your friend out, is get her information on all those platforms and tie it to her company name. Once she does that, and once she posts a few things, then I would suggest to start doing what this is, which is to magnify your efforts by doing an ad campaign. And those of you who are recruiters, you're in HR, same thing. You know, I see that. I'm so glad James said that. I see that happen a lot too, where the recruiter's profile is not fully filled out. It's not necessarily tied directly to the company page. I've also seen that done. You want to make sure that's all done correctly, so that puts you in the best light whenever your candidates start to look you up. Okay, so going back to our discussion, conversions, users, and visitors, that's the same thing. And James, let me know if they help to answer your question. We talked about this a bit ago. You don't want to make them wait too long to order, because, let me go back to this. As if it takes too long for these two people to get waited on. We all know what happens, right? They leave. They're not going to stay. So this is what happens when the application process is too long. They leave. We run the numbers. Roughly about 98% of the people are going to leave anyway. So you're going to make it even that much more worse if you make it too long for them to fill it out. So make sure the application process is very short. Now, once they order their food and they sit down, again, you don't want to make them wait too long. Let's go ahead and get some service out to them. Again, I don't own a restaurant, guys. I'm using this as an analogy to help understand this whole ad platform thing. Once you've created a conversion from the ad platform and it turns into a user or a visitor on your webpage, the next thing you want them to do is you want them to actually purchase something. Now, in the recruitment business, that's an applicant. That's someone who applies for the job. That's literally like as if they're buying, because they're saying, look, if the situation's right, I'm actually willing to work for your company. That's an offer. They're making a buying offer, so to speak. They're showing interest. Now, whether you close them or not, that's a whole different story. But at least they're showing that they have an interest, okay? So you want to make this whole process as seamless as possible, which calls for your interview process to be strong. The offer process should be strong. All of that should be together so that your applicant actually turns into ultimately this, which is a new hire, a happy customer. So if you're in a business where you're selling something, you want them to be a happy customer as fast as possible so they can refer you to other people and basically be a part of your team. Because whether you're building up a recruitment team, let's say if you're recruiting for nurses, or if you're looking for buyers of your business, either concept works the same. You want to bring them into a community of other buyers of your service, right? So you don't want to make it a situation where they feel like they're alone in the process. In fact, those of you who are recruiters, I will encourage you, especially if you're doing nurse recruiting, to watch the show tomorrow. I'll be on with Teresa Mazzaro. We're going to talk to someone who's a nurse manager and how she kind of built her career, but we're going to get her feedback on what her process was like in finding her dream job, her career. I think it's going to be very helpful. But going back to our discussion here, just think about those terms. I want to demystify those terms. Now that you understand this, why do I say audience? Let me go back. This is key right here. When we're building this audience out of our potential people who we want to do business with, in our case in recruiting, people who we want to apply for our jobs, and we fill their job, we fill our jobs with these great candidates. And if you have a business, your customers, your customer base, right? What you want to do, because you don't have unlimited ad dollars, what you want to do is make sure that the audience is built, and that audience is going to be determined by who you're targeting after. So in the case of, let's say I'm going to use nurses, for example. Let's say my target is nurses. I want to make sure that my ads are presented to people who are interested in things that a nurse would be interested in. So a nurse would likely be interested in things like drug references. When they're trying to measure out drugs, or they're trying to follow prescriptions, they're trying to run calculations in their job. Nurse equipment. A lot of nurses buy their own stethoscopes. The American Nurse Association If I'm an OB nurse, or if I'm let's say an ICU nurse or an ER nurse, I may be a part of a certain association. In other words, the platform of, let's say, Google and YouTube and things like that, Facebook, they can start to determine what those nurses look like online, and they can create a bigger, larger audience for you that mimics how those people interact online. So going back to my food analogy, I can find a set of folks online, build an audience of people who would be more likely to take action on my ads if I find people who just like coffee. They're always looking up stuff on coffee. Or I may find out, for example, that nurses, which by the way, a lot of nurses like coffee, I might find an affinity. I can build an audience by an affinity. So if I find that people who like my product or my service, or in the case of recruitment, I can look at people who have another common interest. Let's say a lot of the nurses also happen to be female and happen to be moms. I might have some ads that are catering towards that. Obviously, as a recruiter, we don't discriminate, male, female, age, all that. We don't discriminate, but we're just talking about marketing here. I'm just giving examples how you can use affinities, right? I might find that if I am looking to search for nurses who speak both Spanish and English, I may find that a lot of the nurses that I may want to target like certain TV shows or certain YouTube channels. For example, in the world of recruiting, especially when we're talking about, let's say, healthcare nurses, for example, there's a lot of healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors, what have you, that have YouTube channels. So I may target anybody who likes that YouTube channel, and that's my audience. Now, what's really cool about the audience, it's not determined on what they search in the web. It may be that they actually are part of a group. Like, for instance, in LinkedIn, there are certain groups you can be a part of. You can also send your ads to those groups. So it doesn't matter if they were looking for a job or not. That's not what I'm concerned with. Like, for instance, this nurse here. I'm not actually concerned if this nurse is looking for a job or not. That's not my concern. I just want to make sure she's a nurse. Once I know she's a nurse, that's someone who could possibly qualify for one of my jobs, right? So that's why I want to continue to advertise. But let's say she's Susie. I'm gonna call her Susie. So let's say Susie here, she's perfectly happy in her job today. Do I still want to show her ads? Absolutely. Because she may not be that happy with her job tomorrow or next week or next month. So I don't mind continuing to send her ads as we go along. What I don't want to do is send it to Susie if she's not a nurse, she's never been to nursing school, and maybe she is an architect or a graphic designer or something like that. I don't want to keep sending her nurse ads. It's going to frustrate her, and I'm just wasting money, right? So we want to make sure that our audiences are solid. It doesn't matter if Susie, who's a nurse, is on the web searching for a job or not. She could be on YouTube looking at, I don't know, BTS or something. I don't know. She could be looking at a prescription, looking up a prescription drug that she's never heard of before, that the doctor prescribed, and she just wants to look it up and see what it's about. She's on a site there. She's looking up to renew her license. I still want to be able to show her ads, even though she wasn't searching for a particular job. So that's why this is not search-based. It's not based on a search. It's based on, does she fit my criteria? Does she fit my target audience? So one way you're gonna end up making more of your ad dollars stretch and really be effective is determine who your audience is and how you're gonna reach that audience. Whether they're interested in your product or service or not, that's not necessarily your main concern at the beginning, especially as a recruiter, because we're going to recruit to people who may not have put up their hands and said they're interested, okay? Fact is, over 75% of the people who are out there will consider an offer, whether they're looking for a job or not. So it's just like with the whole adage of why they used to cold call, same thing. Now, I don't know how many of you guys out there like cold calling. I don't. We haven't cold called in a very long, I don't know how many years now. We don't. This is what we do. This is the play we run. We know how to do ads, right, to reach these these candidates, and we've worked on candidates on job orders all the way from front level position all the way to the C-suite, and it works across the board. So I'm not giving you theory here. This is not something I'm trying to figure out. We have over 2 million views. We'll hit 3 million views by the end of the year, and literally have hired hundreds of people using what I'm showing you here. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Hopefully I helped to kind of demystify some of these terms here. You know, first of all, you know, it's impressions or views. You want to limit that to who's in your audience. How do you build an audience? You start to think about who your audience is, what things they would be interested in, and you start to build out a campaign toward those people in the audience. If you're using LinkedIn, I would suggest it be more based on their job title. And then if you want to drill down further, you can go by their company size, you can go by their seniority, things like that. You can even target by language, because remember, roughly only about a tenth of LinkedIn is in the US. Like 90% of LinkedIn active users are not even in the US, okay? Maybe it's a little off, maybe it's 75%, but just a large majority are overseas. They're not here in the US. In fact, if you're watching this now, there's a good chance you're probably watching this from somewhere outside the United States. And I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here, by the way. Oh, Fatah Busaid. Thank you. She says, thanks, it's interesting. Thank you for being here. So keep that in mind. Keep your audience in mind. Make sure that when you're using the platform that you are targeting the audience. Same way with Google and YouTube. You don't want to go for search. Search is important because people do search things on Google. But you don't want to be reliant on search, because that means, using the example of Susie, that means Susie would have to be searching something about a job before you can catch her, and by that time it's too late. By that, if you're waiting for the person to search for your type of job before you show your ads, I've already got 3 or 4 months ahead of you, because I've already been showing her my ads for the last 3 or 4 months. See, so as far as your competition is concerned, you want to stay ahead of the game, and you want to advertise and get your impressions and views in front of people who are your target audience, not necessarily someone who's ready to buy right now. Obviously, search is great in the sense that if you're already doing this, and when they do go to search, boom, you send them another ad, that puts you ahead of the game because you've already been advertising to them over a long period of time. Does that make sense? Same way with the engagement, the video views and all that. Same thing. You want to make sure that you are showing your ads to people who are more interested in watching it. And so here's one thing I'll add here. If someone watches your video for more than 30 seconds, using the YouTube as an example, or if they click on your ad, that shows some level of interest. So you're going to want to retarget them and send another ad to that person. And you're like, well, how do I do that? Well, you just got to make sure that on your landing page, you've got those right back-end codes that will trigger that, oh, Susie visited my site. So I want to make sure the next time Susie visits a site that's on a platform that I advertise on, I want to send them another ad, whether that's Google or YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever the case is, okay? So you want to have an opportunity to retarget that person after they've left your website. Because remember, and these are numbers are across the board, 98% of the people who visit your website are not going to apply. Unless it's just some super high demand job, maybe. Maybe it's, let's say it's 10%, but that's still 90% of the people. That still means 90% of the people who visit your site are not going to apply. And I would venture to say that very few of you have a hard to fill job where 90% or more end up applying. It's probably more like maybe 2%, maybe 3% at the most. Most cases it's going to be a half percent to 1%. So you got to make sure you send them ads to keep them coming back to your landing page. Okay, so if you don't have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and close up for the day. Thank you for allowing me to kind of practice on you a little bit. This is one of the presentations I'm kind of working through, and I know I'm going to get better at this. So if you're watching the replay, give me your feedback. Let me know if you have any other questions. I will be reading the comments. If you have questions, I will answer them. I will take time to answer. Even if it's outside of recruiting, I certainly don't mind helping. I'm glad to be of assistance, glad to serve, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the evening.